The early morning sun painted the horizon in warm shades of gold and orange, slowly creeping over the vast expanse of the plains. Ayanna stood at the edge of her family's land, her gaze stretching across the open fields, where the wind whispered through the tall grass. The ranch was quiet, almost too quiet, except for the soft lowing of cattle in the distance and the occasional crow flying overhead. It had been this way for many months now, ever since her husband, Dakota, had died unexpectedly. Life without him was harder than she had ever imagined. Every corner of the ranch reminded her of him, his old hat hung on the fence post, his boots by the barn door, and the memories both comforted and pained her. Ayanna's days were long and tiring, but she carried them with strength and determination. She woke before the sun, tending to the animals, and feeding her children before she even considered herself. There were chores that never ended. Mending fences, checking the water troughs, and ensuring that the crops would survive the harsh weather. Each task was a battle against the wildland itself. But she refused to let it defeat her. Her hands were calloused and rough from hard work, but to her, each line and scar was a mark of resilience. Her children, little Nahele and quiet little Nizoni, were still young enough to need her guidance, yet old enough to notice the changes in their lives. They missed their father, though they did not always say so. Sometimes, Nahele would stare out across the plains, mimicking the thoughtful expression that once belonged to Dakota. Nizoni, more reserved and observant, preferred to sit by the fire with her mother, listening to stories of her father and their ancestors. Ayanna cherished these moments, for they were a bridge between the past and the uncertain present. The nearby town was small, a cluster of wooden buildings surrounded by dust roads. Some townspeople were friendly and helpful, while others were wary of Ayanna's Apache heritage. She had learned to navigate these dynamics carefully. Her life was a delicate balance of independence and cooperation. She could not afford to rely on anyone too heavily, but at the same time, she knew the value of alliances in a world where mistrust could turn even neighbors into rivals. It was on one such morning, as she was repairing a broken fence near the edge of her property, that she first noticed movement in the distance. A man was approaching, riding a tall, well-fed horse. His gait was confident, the kind that spoke of experience with the land. His clothing, though practical, had a certain polish to it, suggesting he came from wealth or position. Ayanna squinted, shielding her eyes against the rising sun. She had seen men like this before, ranchers from the nearby settlements, often passing by her land on business, sometimes with offers of trade, sometimes with demands. As the man drew closer, Ayanna felt a mixture of curiosity and caution. He reined in his horse and stopped at the edge of her fence, tipping his hat politely. "Good morning," he called, his voice calm but firm. "Name's Jackson. I own the ranch a few miles north. I was hoping we could talk about some grazing arrangements for the cattle." Ayanna did not lower her guard. "I manage my land well," she replied, her voice steady. "I don't take kindly to strangers telling me what I should do." Her eyes studied him carefully, noting the way he held himself, the steady confidence in his movements. He was no ordinary passerby, and she had learned over the years that first impressions could be deceiving. Jackson nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "I only came to discuss a potential arrangement that might help both our ranches survive the dry season. I mean no harm. And I respect that this is your home." His tone was respectful, but there was a quiet determination in his eyes that made Ayanna wary. She sensed that he was used to getting his way, and she did not intend to be anyone's pawn. The conversation that followed was careful and measured. Ayanna listened as Jackson outlined his proposal, weighing the benefits and risks. She was intelligent and perceptive, noticing the subtle ways he tried to earn her trust, the gentle patience he showed while she questioned every detail. Part of her was annoyed by the intrusion into her morning, yet another part felt the faintest flicker of curiosity. Could this man, who seemed so confident and capable, offer something more than just business? Or was he like many others, seeing her only as a woman to charm or conquer? As they spoke, the wind shifted, carrying the scents of sagebrush and earth across the field. Ayanna inhaled deeply, grounding herself. She would not let sentiment cloud her judgment. Every decision she made now was for her children and for the survival of the land that had belonged to her family for generations. She had fought too hard and lost too much to allow anyone to undermine her authority over it. Jackson, sensing her hesitation, adjusted his approach. He spoke less of business and more of understanding the land, of respecting its rhythms and the hard work it demanded. "I can see you know this land well," he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "It's not easy to keep it alive, especially after what you've endured." Ayanna's expression softened slightly, though her caution did not waver. It was rare for anyone to acknowledge the weight she carried without pity or condescension. She had grown used to people underestimating her because she was a woman and because she was Apache. Her pride did not allow her to be grateful for small gestures of kindness alone. Trust had to be earned. As the morning turned into midday, Jackson left, promising to return at a later time to continue their discussion. Ayanna watched him ride away, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She could not deny that he intrigued her, but intrigue was not enough to dismantle the walls she had built around her heart. Her life had been defined by loss and responsibility, and she would not risk her children's security or her independence lightly. After Jackson left, Ayanna returned to her chores with a renewed sense of focus. She mended fences, checked the livestock, and ensured that the water troughs were full. Yet, beneath the rhythm of her work, her thoughts often drifted back to the rancher who had appeared on her land that morning. Who was he? Really, could a man like him truly understand the life she led, the burdens she carried, and the pride she held in her family's legacy? Or would he, like so many others, see only what he wanted: a woman to charm, a life to influence, or land to control? By evening, the sun was low, painting long shadows across the land. Ayanna's children had played near the barn while she finished her work. They laughed, unaware of the complexities that weighed upon their mother's mind. She watched them, feeling a deep sense of love and responsibility. Every decision she made was for them, every boundary she set was to protect them. And as the stars began to emerge in the night sky, she felt both the weight of her solitude and the quiet strength that had carried her through months of grief. In the quiet of the evening, Ayanna allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She thought of Dakota, of the life they had shared, and of the resilience she now needed to embrace. Her path was not easy, and it would never be simple, but she was determined to face it with courage, intelligence, and integrity. The land, her children, and her ancestors demanded nothing less, and though she did not yet know it, the encounter with Jackson would set in motion a series of events that would challenge her trust, her assumptions, and her heart. For now, she remained vigilant, proud, and fiercely independent, standing as a guardian of her home, her family, and her dignity, ready to face whatever the future might bring. The next few days passed quietly on Ayanna's ranch. The routines of tending animals, checking fences, and caring for her children filled her hours, leaving little room for distraction. Yet, despite the busyness, her thoughts occasionally drifted to Jackson, the rancher who had appeared on her land. She reminded herself repeatedly that she had no need for strangers in her life, especially those whose intentions could be unclear. Still, there was something about his calm confidence and respectful demeanor that lingered in her mind. It was mid-morning when she first saw him again. He rode slowly along the edge of her property, his horse steady beneath him, the sun glinting off the metal buckle of his saddle. Ayanna stood in the doorway of her barn, wiping her hands on a cloth, her posture firm. "You're back," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of caution and curiosity. Jackson tipped his hat slightly, smiling without arrogance. "Good morning, Ayanna. I hope I'm not interrupting your work. I wanted to talk further about our cattle and the possibility of sharing grazing space during the dry months. I promise it will be brief." Ayanna studied him carefully. There was nothing in his posture that seemed threatening, yet her instincts warned her to stay guarded. "If this is about business, then speak plainly. I have chores to finish, and I do not have patience for long talks." Her tone was firm but fair. She knew the value of efficiency. Time wasted on empty words could mean neglected livestock or damaged fences. Jackson nodded. "Very well. I'll keep it short." He dismounted and led his horse to a nearby patch of grass, allowing it to graze while he spoke. "The summer has been harsher than expected. Some of my pastures won't sustain all my cattle without additional water and shade. I thought we could make an agreement that benefits both our ranches." Ayanna crossed her arms, listening but not yet convinced. "And why should I help you? I work hard to keep this land alive. It isn't charity, and I won't risk my cattle for a man I barely know." Her words were sharp, but they carried honesty rather than anger. She had learned early that kindness without boundaries could lead to exploitation, and she would not let that happen here. Jackson met her gaze steadily. "I understand completely. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a fair arrangement, one that protects your interests as much as mine. I know the value of hard work, and I respect those who put in the effort. I see that in you." "Ah." Ayanna blinked, surprised by the sincerity in his words. Many people had praised her in the past, but their praise often felt empty or patronizing. This felt different, though she was not yet ready to lower her guard. "We'll see," she replied cautiously. "Talk is cheap. Actions matter more than words." Jackson inclined his head in agreement. "Then let my actions speak." He began to explain the practical details where his cattle could graze without damaging her land, how he would contribute to maintenance of the shared water source, and ways to ensure the safety of both her livestock and his. His knowledge of ranching was clear, and he spoke with a precision that impressed her. Ayanna felt a reluctant respect forming, though she reminded herself to stay wary. Over the next few weeks, Jackson visited several times. Each meeting was a careful negotiation, a blend of practicality and conversation. Occasionally, the talk would drift beyond business, touching on the land itself, the seasons, and the ways the animals behaved. Ayanna found herself intrigued by his observations. He noticed details she had often overlooked, small signs in the weather, or the behavior of the cattle that predicted changes ahead. Still, she remained cautious. Ayanna had grown up with warnings from her elders. Strangers could not always be trusted, and appearances often hid true intentions. She noticed the subtle ways Jackson attempted to connect with her, the small gestures of courtesy, the patience he showed when she questioned him repeatedly. Some days, she would catch herself wondering if perhaps he was genuinely interested in understanding her life and work, rather than merely seeking her attention. One afternoon, as she repaired a section of fence that had been damaged by a recent storm, Jackson approached once again. This time, he brought a young boy from his ranch, a helper who needed guidance in herding cattle. "I thought you might need an extra hand," Jackson said. "He's eager to learn, and I believe your expertise could teach him more than I ever could." Ayanna studied the boy, then looked at Jackson. She could have said no, but something in his eyes reassured her. She nodded. "Very well. He will help for the day. But he listens to me, not you." Her tone was firm, but not unkind. She could see that Jackson respected her authority, and that alone earned a measure of her trust. As the day progressed, Ayanna guided the boy in tending to the cattle, teaching him the proper way to move the herd, recognize sick animals, and repair fences. Jackson observed quietly, assisting only when necessary. During these hours, Ayanna noticed a change in her own perception. Jackson was not imposing himself, nor was he attempting to undermine her. He respected her knowledge and experience. It was a rare thing in her life, and it made her heart cautiously consider that not all men sought control or conquest. Yet, despite these positive signs, the memories of past experiences and societal assumptions lingered. That evening, as she prepared dinner for her children, she could not shake the feeling of tension that had grown inside her. She had faced men before who offered help only to manipulate or claim something she would not give freely. She could not ignore the possibility that Jackson might have similar motives. Her doubts came to the surface the next morning when Jackson appeared again, this time carrying a small gift, a bundle of tools he thought might help her with her daily chores. Ayanna took them, her expression guarded. "Why bring me this?" she asked, suspicion evident in her voice. Jackson's response was calm and direct. To make your work easier, not harder. Nothing more. His sincerity was clear. Yet Ayanna could not immediately trust it. Her mind raced with questions. Was this merely a tactic to win her favor? Or was he genuinely thoughtful? Their conversation became heated as she confronted the uncertainty that had been building inside her. Do you just want my land? Or my trust? Or me? She asked sharply, her voice tinged with anger and frustration. I have fought too hard to lose control of my life again. I will not be another story of a woman who lets someone take what is hers. Jackson was taken aback, but he remained composed. Ayanna, I respect you more than you realize. I have no desire to take anything from you that is not freely given. My interest is in cooperation, not conquest. You have every right to question me. The honesty in his voice struck something deep within her. For the first time in weeks, Ayanna felt a flicker of clarity. Perhaps not every man who entered her life had hidden motives. Perhaps some could genuinely be allies, people who respected her and her family. Yet, she also knew that trust must be earned, not assumed. Days turned into weeks, and the cautious relationship between Ayanna and Jackson continued to develop. They met regularly, discussing practical matters, navigating the challenges of the land, and slowly learning about one another's strengths and principles. Jackson's patience never wavered, and Ayanna's wariness began to soften, though she remained vigilant. During this time, she also observed how Jackson treated his own ranch and workers. He was firm but fair, careful to balance authority with understanding. Ayanna noted the respect he inspired without demanding it, and it made her consider how people could be shaped by both character and action, rather than simply words or appearances. One afternoon, after a particularly long day, Jackson rode alongside Ayanna as they checked the farthest corners of the land. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the plains. The wind carried the scent of grass and earth, mingling with the faint smoke from her cooking fire. Ayanna spoke little, but the silence was not uncomfortable. It was a shared space, filled with mutual respect and understanding. As they returned to the main ranch, Ayanna realized that Jackson's presence had become a subtle part of her life. Not a threat, not a distraction, but a cautious acknowledgement that human connection could exist, even in a world full of challenges and distrust. She still had her doubts, her fears, and her boundaries. But she also began to see that perhaps a bridge was forming between her independence and the possibility of shared strength. By the time evening settled over the plains, Ayanna's heart was conflicted yet steady. She had faced the uncertainty of a stranger's intentions, tested them against her instincts, and found that respect and honesty could exist even in unexpected places. Jackson had not yet earned her full trust, but he had begun to show that not all encounters were to be feared or resisted. And for the first time in many months, Ayanna allowed herself a small measure of hope, not for romance or companionship, but for the possibility of a partnership built on respect, understanding, and the shared responsibility of life on the land. The days that followed would continue to test her resolve, challenge her assumptions, and push the boundaries of her cautious heart. But for now, as she stood in the fading light, watching her children play, and feeling the strength in her own hands and spirit, Ayanna knew that she was not alone. She had survived loss, she had defended her land and family, and she had begun to discover that perhaps some people could enter her life not to take, but to walk beside her. The summer air had grown warmer, carrying the scent of dry grass and sun-baked earth across the plains. Ayanna's mornings were filled with the same rhythm of chores and care for her children, yet lately, her thoughts were often interrupted by Jackson's presence. He had become a regular visitor, not only in her mind but also on her land. The cautious respect they had built over the past weeks was slowly being tested by uncertainty and misunderstanding. It was during one of these days that the tension between them first became unmistakable. Jackson had ridden over early in the morning, intending to help move some cattle to a new grazing area. Ayanna was already hard at work, mending a section of fence that had been weakened by the summer storms. She looked up as he approached, his horse stepping carefully through the uneven terrain. "Good morning, Ayanna," he called, keeping his tone polite and steady. "I thought I could assist you with the fence today." Two sets of hands are better than one. I be and doc. I rest hands than one. Ayana's eyes narrowed. She appreciated the offer, but a part of her bristled at the familiarity of his tone. I can manage, she said firmly. I don't need help from anyone, especially not from someone who doesn't live here. Jackson dismounted, setting his horse to graze at a safe distance. I understand, he replied calmly, though a flicker of frustration crossed his features. I only meant to lighten the load. Ayana's fingers tightened on the hammer as she worked. She knew he meant no harm, but she could not ignore the underlying tension that had begun to build over their interactions. The town whispered about him, about his previous relationships, about the way he treated women. Ayana had her own history with loss and mistrust, and she refused to let herself be vulnerable without reason. Hours passed with silence between them. Jackson worked nearby, careful not to intrude but always present, his eyes occasionally meeting hers. The quiet became a test of patience and resolve. Finally, Ayana stopped hammering and wiped her brow with the back of her hand. Why do you keep coming here? She asked sharply, unable to contain the question any longer. Do you just want my land? Or are you here for me? Her voice rose slightly, tinged with anger and frustration. She had feared this confrontation, yet she could not avoid it any longer. The question had been simmering in her mind for days, and she needed to know the truth. Jackson's face remained calm, but his eyes showed a flicker of surprise. He took a step closer, careful to maintain respect and space. Ayana, he said slowly, I have no desire to take what isn't offered. I am here because cooperation benefits both of us. I am not here to claim anything from you that you are not willing to give. Your land, your family, and your independence are yours alone. I respect that completely. Ayana's hands fell to her sides, her chest heaving as she struggled with her emotions. Part of her wanted to believe him, to lower the walls she had so carefully built. But past experiences and the caution instilled by her elders warned her against trusting too easily. Words are easy, she said, her voice quieter now but still firm. Actions matter more. I have seen too many promises broken to accept words as truth. Jackson nodded, acknowledging her stance. Then let my actions prove my intentions. I will not force anything, and I will not disrespect you or your home. Despite his assurances, Ayana remained uneasy. She had allowed him glimpses into her life, shared small details of her work and family, but the fear of betrayal lingered. She could not ignore the possibility that some men, even those who seemed sincere, might have hidden motives. Trust had to be earned, not assumed. The days that followed were marked by careful observation and silent testing. Ayana watched how Jackson interacted with her children, how he treated the animals, and how he respected the boundaries she set. He never overstepped, never demanded more than she was willing to give. Yet, the shadow of doubt remained. She would catch herself wondering, could someone like him genuinely respect her independence and values? Or was this all a subtle attempt to win her over? Like so many before him, one afternoon, an unexpected problem arose. A sudden storm rolled across the plains, with dark clouds gathering quickly and a fierce wind whipping through the grass. Ayana's livestock became restless, and she knew she had to act fast to prevent injury or loss. Jackson arrived just as the first drops of rain began to fall. Let's move the herd to the shelter near the creek, he suggested, his voice calm despite the growing wind. It will protect them from the storm. Ayana hesitated for a moment, then nodded. There was no time for debate. Together, they guided the cattle across uneven ground, their hands and voices working in unison. In the urgency of the moment, Ayana felt a sense of partnership forming a practical, mutual understanding born out of necessity. They moved as a team, and for the first time in weeks, the tension between them seemed less important than the task at hand. After the storm passed, the sun returned, casting shimmering light over the wet plains. Ayana looked around, noting that none of her livestock had been harmed. She felt a grudging sense of respect for Jackson, not for his words, but for his steady presence and quick thinking in a crisis. He had proven himself capable, reliable, and genuinely concerned for the well-being of her land and her family. Yet, Even in this moment, uncertainty lingered. That evening, as she prepared dinner for her children, she found herself reflecting on the conversation she had with Jackson days before, the one where she had asked if he only wanted her. The words still carried weight, a reminder of her fears and the protective walls she had built around her heart. Jackson's continued presence had sparked a mixture of curiosity, respect, and unease. Ayanna realized that she was beginning to see him differently, not as a threat or a potential manipulator, but as a person who might be capable of genuine friendship or partnership. And yet, she knew the fine line between trust and vulnerability, and she was not ready to cross it entirely. The tension reached a peak the next week, during another encounter that tested their understanding of each other. Jackson had come to discuss a new arrangement for the coming months, one that required more collaboration between their ranches. Ayanna listened carefully, analyzing every word, every gesture, seeking the truth behind his intentions. "Why should I agree to this?" she asked, her voice firm but not unkind. "I have worked hard to manage my land and my family. I will not risk them for someone else's convenience." Jackson met her gaze steadily. "Because it benefits both of us. I am not asking for charity or control. I am asking for cooperation. And I will respect whatever decision you make." Ayanna's eyes narrowed. "And if I refuse, will you hold this against me? Will you try to force me?" Jackson shook his head. "No. My respect does not depend on your agreement. I will not impose myself on your life. Ayanna, that is not my way." The honesty in his voice stirred something deep within her. For the first time, she felt the possibility that someone could genuinely respect her independence, even while seeking a connection built on mutual understanding. But she was still wary. The world had taught her that people often said what they believed others wanted to hear, and actions were the true measure of character. The following days were marked by small, deliberate gestures from Jackson. He helped with minor repairs, offered advice when asked, and respected every boundary she set. Ayanna observed him closely, learning to read his intentions not in words, but in behavior. Slowly, the tension began to shift, not entirely gone, but softened by the evidence of his consistency and respect. Still, Ayanna's heart remained guarded. She had been through loss, betrayal, and the harsh realities of life on the plains. She could not allow herself to be naive. Every step forward was measured, cautious, and deliberate. Jackson had proven his capability, but he had yet to earn the deeper trust she reserved for few people in her life. By the end of Part 3, Ayanna began to understand a crucial truth. Trust is not given. It is built through action, consistency, and respect. Jackson had begun to lay the foundation for that trust. But the road ahead was long, filled with challenges, tests, and moments that would reveal the true nature of both their characters. For now, Ayanna remained vigilant, aware of her feelings and boundaries, yet cautiously curious about the possibilities that lay ahead. She had survived loss, protected her family, and navigated a world that often underestimated her. And in Jackson's presence, she began to glimpse that partnership, respect, and understanding could exist even in the most uncertain of circumstances. The air was crisp that morning, carrying the faint scent of smoke from nearby homes and the sweet aroma of wildflowers beginning to bloom along the plains. Ayanna woke early, as usual, checking the barn and the livestock before her children stirred. She had grown used to the quiet rhythm of the ranch, the steady hum of chores that connected her to the land and to her late husband's memory. But there was a sense of change in the air, an unspoken tension that hinted at challenges she could not yet see. Jackson arrived shortly after sunrise, his horse moving carefully across the uneven ground. Unlike his earlier visits, there was a sense of purpose in his stride. He approached Ayanna with a respectful nod, and she returned it, her expression cautious but composed. "Morning," he said simply. "I thought we could work together on the far pasture today. The fence lines were damaged in the last storm, and some of your livestock may have wandered too close to the creek." Ayanna's hands tightened on the tools she carried, but she nodded. "We'll need to move quickly. The terrain is tricky, and the creek has risen after the rain. I don't want any animals lost." Together, they set off toward the distant field, Ayanna leading with a firm confidence that came from years of experience. Jackson followed closely, assisting when necessary but always giving her space to guide the work. As they walked, the tension that had simmered between them for weeks began to shift. The shared task forced them to communicate, to observe each other's decisions, and to rely on one another in a practical way. By midday, they reached the far pasture. The fence was damaged in multiple places, and several cows had strayed close to the creek's edge. Ayanna took a deep breath, surveying the situation. "We'll need to fix these fences first, then guide the cattle back before they wander any further," she said. Her voice was calm, but firm, reflecting the authority she carried naturally. Jackson nodded, rolling up his sleeves. "Lead the way. I'll follow your instructions." For hours, they worked side by side. Jackson lifted heavy posts, tightened wires, and offered suggestions when asked. Ayanna observed him carefully, noting the precision in his movements and the patience in his tone. He did not try to take over, nor did he rush her decisions. Every action he took showed respect for her knowledge and authority. And slowly, Ayanna began to see him as more than just a persistent visitor. He was a partner in the truest sense of the word, even if she could not yet fully trust him with her heart. As the sun climbed high, they encountered a new challenge. One of the cows, startled by the sudden movement of the fence repair, bolted toward the creek. Ayanna's heart leapt in alarm, and without thinking, she ran after it, calling out for Jackson's help. He moved quickly, herding the other cattle away from danger while she guided the lone cow back to safety. In that moment, Ayanna realized how much she depended on him not emotionally, but practically. She trusted his strength and judgment, even if her heart remained guarded. After the herd was safely corralled, they paused to rest under the shade of a lone tree. Ayanna wiped sweat from her brow, breathing heavily but feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. Jackson handed her a canteen of water, his expression earnest. "You handled that well," he said. "It could have been much worse, if not for your quick thinking." Ayanna took a sip, studying him. "It was a team effort," she replied, her voice softening slightly. "I could not have done it alone, and I wouldn't have wanted to." For a moment, they sat in silence, the only sounds coming from the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant lowing of cattle. In that shared quiet, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of mutual respect and reliability. Ayanna realized that while her trust in him was still cautious, it had begun to grow through their shared experiences. The next challenge came sooner than expected. A neighboring rancher, known for his aggressive tactics and disregard for boundaries, appeared near Ayanna's property, claiming that some of her cattle had strayed onto his land. The man was loud and confrontational, demanding immediate restitution. Ayanna's first instinct was to stand her ground, refusing to be bullied. Jackson, observing the situation, stayed close, but did not intervene unless necessary. "Your cattle have crossed into my land," the man barked. "You will pay for any damage, or there will be consequences." Ayanna stepped forward, her stance firm. "These cattle belong to me, and I have taken all necessary precautions to prevent them from wandering. If they crossed your land, it was unintentional, and I will work with you to resolve it fairly, but I will not be intimidated." Jackson added quietly, "I can testify that she has maintained proper fences and has acted responsibly. The herd strayed only because of the recent storm, not negligence." The man scowled, clearly annoyed that he could not provoke a reaction from either of them. After a tense exchange, he finally relented, grumbling about resolving the matter later. Ayanna felt a surge of relief, but also gratitude. Jackson's calm presence had helped her navigate the confrontation without escalating it into something dangerous. That evening, as they returned to Ayanna's ranch, she reflected on the day's events. The challenges they had faced together had revealed qualities in Jackson that words alone could not convey: strength, patience, and a genuine commitment to fairness. She felt a cautious admiration for him, even as she reminded herself that admiration was not the same as trust, and trust was not the same as affection. Her children, oblivious to the subtle tensions and negotiations of adult life, ran to greet her as they returned. Nahele clutched her mother's hand, and Nizoni followed closely, their laughter filling the yard. Ayana felt a surge of protectiveness, knowing that every decision she made affected not only her land but the safety and well-being of her children. Jackson lingered briefly, helping secure the barn and ensuring the cattle were properly fed. His actions were consistent with the respect he had shown throughout the day, never imposing, never overstepping, but always present when needed. Ayana watched him work and felt a small, cautious acknowledgement forming in her heart. Perhaps some people could truly be allies, not threats. Over the next few days, storms continued to challenge the land, and with each passing challenge, Ayana and Jackson worked together, navigating obstacles that required cooperation, quick thinking, and shared effort. Each time, Ayana observed his actions carefully, noting the reliability and consistency in his behavior. Slowly, the tension and suspicion between them began to give way to a cautious understanding, a recognition that while words could be deceiving, actions often spoke the truth. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the plains in shades of gold and purple, Ayana found herself sitting on the porch, watching her children play in the fading light. Jackson stood nearby, observing the horizon with a thoughtful expression. Ayana realized that she no longer saw him as an intruder in her life. He had proven himself capable, trustworthy in small and significant ways, and respectful of her boundaries. She spoke quietly, more to herself than to him. "Perhaps people are not always as they seem," she said. Jackson turned slightly, a hint of a smile on his face. He did not respond immediately, understanding that some thoughts needed space to grow. In that moment, Ayana felt a subtle shift within herself. She was still cautious, still protective of her children and her land. But she also recognized the value of partnership and support. Jackson's presence was no longer merely tolerated, it was acknowledged as potentially beneficial, even necessary in facing the unpredictable challenges of life on the plains. By the time night fell, the ranch was quiet. The only sounds coming from the occasional call of an owl and the gentle rustling of leaves. Ayana sat with her children nearby. Reflecting on the day's events, she realized that trust was not built in moments of ease, but in moments of shared challenge, in the way someone stood beside you when the world seemed determined to test your limits. Jackson had not yet earned her complete trust, and she was aware of that, but she could see that he was different from many others she had encountered. His actions, aligned with his words, his respect for her independence genuine, and his willingness to help consistent. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a small measure of hope. Life on the ranch would always be difficult. Storms would come. Fences would break. And livestock would stray. Yet, Ayana felt a quiet reassurance knowing that she was not facing these challenges entirely alone. She had begun to see that true partnership was built not on promises or words, but on shared effort, respect, and consistency over time. As she prepared her children for bed that night, she reflected on the lessons of the past weeks. Vigilance, patience, and careful observation were crucial, but so was openness to those who demonstrated integrity through their actions. And while her heart remained guarded, she could not deny the growing acknowledgement that Jackson might be someone who could walk beside her, not in place of her strength, but alongside it. The night settled over the plains, peaceful and still. Ayana looked out across the land she had worked so hard to protect, feeling a sense of quiet pride and cautious hope. The challenges ahead were many, but she had begun to see that some partnerships, built on trust and mutual respect, could make those challenges surmountable. And in that understanding, she found a small, but meaningful, sense of possibility for the future. The morning sun broke over the plains with a gentle warmth, casting long shadows across the ranch. Ayana moved through her daily routines with the same care she had always shown, tending to the animals, checking fences, and preparing breakfast for her children. Yet, there was a quiet difference in the air today, a sense of resolution and possibility that had not been present in the past months. She felt stronger, more certain, and more capable of facing whatever challenges might come. Jackson arrived mid-morning, as he had for weeks now, but there was a sense of ease in his approach. He rode with the calm confidence that had become familiar to her, yet without the tension or uncertainty that had marked their early encounters. Ayanna acknowledged him with a nod, her eyes briefly meeting his. "Morning," she said simply, her voice carrying both authority and quiet warmth. "Morning, Ayanna," he replied. "I thought we could finish the repairs to the far fence today and check the water troughs. The summer heat has been harsh, and I want to make sure your herd stays healthy." Ayanna studied him for a moment. In the past, she would have been wary of his intentions, questioning every word, every gesture. Now, she could see the honesty in his actions and the consistency of his character. She nodded. "Very well, let's get to it." Together, they moved across the ranch, working efficiently yet deliberately. The shared labor was no longer just about necessity. It had become a rhythm, a way to build understanding and mutual respect. Jackson followed her guidance, offering help when appropriate, but never overstepping or undermining her authority. Ayanna appreciated this more than she could express. Trust, she realized, was not something given lightly. It was earned through action and consistency. And Jackson had demonstrated both. As they worked, Ayanna's thoughts drifted to the challenges of the past weeks, the storms that had tested the land, the confrontation with the neighboring rancher, and the countless small decisions that had shaped her children's safety and her livelihood. All had required resilience, courage, and sometimes cooperation. Jackson had been present in many of these moments, not as a replacement for her strength, but as an ally who respected it. By midday, they had finished repairing the far fence and secured the livestock. Jackson offered to help with the water troughs, and Ayanna accepted. Recognizing that collaboration did not diminish her independence, it strengthened it. They worked side by side, moving with efficiency and silent understanding. Each action was a testament to the respect and trust they had gradually built over time. After the chores were complete, they rested under the shade of a large tree, the children playing nearby. Ayanna allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She thought of her late husband, Dakota, and the life they had shared. She had feared that she would never feel safe or whole again after his death, that the world would always be a place of loss and struggle. Yet, she realized that life had a way of opening new doors, of presenting opportunities for understanding, partnership, and even hope. Jackson broke the silence, his voice gentle. "You've managed this land incredibly well, Ayanna. I've seen the care and dedication you put into every detail. Your strength is remarkable." Ayanna met his gaze, her expression steady. "Thank you," she said quietly. "But strength alone is not enough. It takes patience, wisdom, and sometimes the willingness to accept help when needed." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "I have learned that the people who truly matter are those who respect boundaries, honor trust, and act with integrity. Words mean little if actions do not follow." Jackson nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I agree. That has been my approach as well. I do not wish to impose or take what is not freely given. I only wish to walk alongside you where it is welcome and needed." For a moment, silence fell again, but it was comfortable this time. There was no tension, no testing of intentions, only mutual recognition and respect. Ayanna felt a quiet sense of peace, knowing that the challenges of the past had led her to this understanding. She could trust Jackson's actions, even if her heart remained cautious in other ways. The following weeks brought more challenges, as the summer heat tested both the land and their resilience. Ayanna and Jackson continued to work together, facing difficulties that required cooperation, quick thinking, and shared effort. From moving stubborn livestock to repairing weather-damaged fences, each challenge strengthened their partnership. Through these shared experiences, Ayanna began to see that collaboration did not diminish her independence. It enhanced it, allowing her to achieve more while still maintaining control over her life and land. Her children grew to appreciate Jackson's presence as well. He was patient and kind, never overstepping but always willing to teach and assist. Nahele began to follow his guidance in learning how to care for the animals, while Nijoni, quieter and more observant, watched carefully and learned through example. Ayana noted with quiet pride that her children were gaining not only practical skills, but also a model of respect, cooperation, and integrity. One evening, after the chores were done and the children were settled for the night, Ayana and Jackson sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the plains. The sky was painted with brilliant shades of orange and pink, the wind carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and earth. Ayana reflected on the journey they had shared, the mistrust, the testing of intentions, and the gradual building of understanding. "You have changed my perspective in ways I did not expect," she said quietly. "I have learned that not all people who enter my life are here to take. Some are here to help, to walk alongside, and to respect what is already strong and whole." Jackson's eyes met hers, a gentle warmth in his expression. "I am glad to hear that. I have always believed that true strength is not in taking, but in standing together where it is needed, without diminishing the other's spirit or independence." Ayana nodded, feeling a sense of clarity she had not experienced in months. The challenges of life on the plains had not disappeared, they never would. But she now understood that strength, trust, and mutual respect could create a foundation for resilience, partnership, and even hope. In the weeks that followed, Ayana and Jackson continued to work together. Not as equals in every sense, but as partners who respected each other's abilities, knowledge, and boundaries. The bond between them grew stronger, built on shared experience, consistent action, and mutual respect. Ayana found that she could rely on him without fear of losing herself or her independence, and Jackson demonstrated that loyalty and integrity were more important than fleeting desires or superficial gains. One afternoon, a small celebration unfolded on the ranch. Jackson had brought a small gift for the children, simple toys handcrafted from wood, and Ayana realized that these gestures reflected not only thoughtfulness, but also an understanding of the importance of family and connection. The children laughed and played, their joy filling the yard, and Ayana felt a quiet sense of gratitude. She had faced loss, hardship, and uncertainty, yet here she was, surrounded by her children and a person who had proven himself trustworthy. That evening, as darkness settled over the ranch, Ayana sat quietly, reflecting on all that had transpired. She thought of Dakota and the life they had shared, of the challenges she had faced alone, and of the lessons she had learned about strength, independence, and trust. She realized that while grief had been a heavy burden, it had also taught her resilience and discernment. And now, she saw that new opportunities, partnerships built on respect, shared effort, and integrity were possible even after loss. Jackson, noticing her quiet reflection, spoke softly. "Ayana, I do not claim to understand all that you have endured, but I wish to honor your strength and to walk beside you where it is welcome. Whatever the future holds, I am here as a partner, not to take, but to support and respect you and your family." Ayana looked at him, her heart steady and thoughtful. She understood the sincerity in his words, for his actions had consistently proven them true. She felt a sense of closure and possibility, a recognition that life could offer support and partnership without threatening her independence or her values. The plains were quiet that night, the stars glittering overhead, as if witnessing the resolution of a journey marked by resilience, trust, and understanding. Ayana felt a sense of peace she had not known in months, knowing that she had navigated challenges, protected her family, and discovered the value of genuine partnership. She realized that life on the ranch would continue to bring trials, storms, and unexpected events, but she no longer faced them alone. Jackson had proven through action, patience, and respect that some people could enter one's life not to take, but to walk beside, to share the burdens, and to honor the strength already present. In that understanding, Ayana felt hope, not reckless or naive, but steady, grounded in experience and discernment. She had survived loss, defended her independence, and protected her children. Now, she could also embrace the possibility of connection, built on trust, respect, and shared effort. As the night deepened, the ranch was peaceful, and Ayanna knew that the journey of life was not about avoiding challenges, but about meeting them with integrity, courage, and reliable companions. Jackson's presence had shown her that partnership was possible without compromise to her strength, and that some bonds were forged not by words alone, but through consistent, trustworthy action. For the first time in many months, Ayanna felt a quiet, steady hope for the future. A future where her children could thrive, her land could prosper, and human connection could exist in a way that honored independence, integrity, and mutual respect. The plains stretched endlessly before her, full of possibility, and she faced them with strength, wisdom, and cautious optimism.